The following program was produced by an independent community producer. The opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect those of the ECAT staff or board of directors.
Giving a voice to the voiceless, pulling stories out of the shadows and putting them under the spotlight, making sure that each person is valued and cared for. This is Humanity First with Peter Evers, presented by BAMSI.
Hi everybody, my name is Peter Evers and welcome to Humanity First for another edition. This week we're going to be topical, as we always are, and we're going to talk about the economic effect of what is going on in Iran, in the war that began a couple of weeks ago. President Trump is making some noises about this not being such a bad thing for America in terms of inflation, in terms of oil prices, in terms of the difficulty that we have looking forward. I would posit that perhaps he's not an economist, and we should talk to an economist about that. And so today, Chuck Zodda is coming back on the program. He is the host of the Financial Exchange, which is syndicated across New England. And he's an economic advisor to the Armstrong Advisory Group. And anybody that listens to this show will know him because he's been on 3 or 4 times. He's going to concentrate on what it means to be at war for the person that lives in Brockton, lives in Easton, and how they are going to be affected financially, not just by oil prices, but we're going to dig in a little bit more deeply to some of the things structurally and core inflation, and that inflation that we see every day is going to affect us in the long term, and perhaps how we can avoid a worldwide recession after a war like this. So stick around, we'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Jamie. I'm an essential worker here at BAMSI, and I'm a nurse. Nurses are essential here at BAMSI because as nurses, we really have the opportunity to make an impact. We have very small ratios, so we have the opportunity to really learn everything about the person served and be able to give the best care. It really serves such a great purpose for me as being a nurse and really why I came into nursing. Learn more about nursing opportunities at bamsijobs.org.
Giving a voice to the voiceless, pulling stories out of the shadows and putting them under the spotlight, making sure that each person is valued and cared for. This is Humanity First with Peter Evers, presented by BAMSI.
Welcome back, everybody. And as promised, at the top of our program, we have Chuck Zodda with us. And Chuck, you were with us a few weeks ago talking about the impact of the first term of the Trump administration and where we're at. I was thinking about this before. I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and there was a prime minister in England called Harold Wilson, and something had gone horribly wrong, and his response to that was, well, a week's a long time in politics. Well, the last 2 weeks has certainly been a long time in politics. And by the way, Chuck Zodda hosts the Financial Exchange, which is a show heard across New England. So I would advise everybody to listen in to that show. But welcome, Chuck.
Yeah, it's great to be here. And obviously, as you mentioned, it's been very busy, very chaotic couple of weeks, and just trying to get information on what's going on is challenging for a number of reasons. But we're navigating the best we can and trying to piece together the best picture of where things stand.
Yeah, the economic impact of this is really interesting to me because, people feel things in their pocket when all of a sudden they're used to paying, I was just telling Adam Juicer before that, in Brockton, I've been paying about $2.60, and I think I'm getting a good deal for that.
Sure.
Went this morning, and there's another 50 cents tacked on that, and it's still going up. Most of the people in our community live paycheck to paycheck. Most of our people balance their books and often have to make decisions that are very difficult decisions economically about whether they feed their kids, buy them medications, or pay for educational sports equipment, something like that. These are the day-to-day struggles of people. President Trump made a statement which was well, in my opinion, his usually sort of dismissive idea that this is all going to be all right and this is the right thing for America. And in some ways that might be the right thing for corporate America, oil prices go up, etc. But, is this really a dream that he's speaking about here, that the economic impact on people who are poor and even people who are earning, a decent income are going to struggle over a long period of time?
I think when we look at the economic impacts, it ultimately it's going to boil down to combination of three different factors, in my opinion. The first is, and the most important one, is just how long does this conflict persist? If there's a path where it's over in within the next 10 days, that means something dramatically different from whether it lingers into the spring and towards Memorial Day or longer. I mean, we could be sitting here at the end of the year potentially. I don't know, and I don't profess to have any knowledge as to exactly how this is going to unfold. It's very much a minute to minute scenario at the moment here. So the duration of this is going to play a role. The second is the scope of it. How much geographic space does this take up, and how many different players get drawn into it? And then the third piece is going to be what's the magnitude of damage that is caused across whatever geographic region that is. And so the problem that we have is really simple. It's that every day that this continues in a situation in which the Strait of Hormuz is not allowing anywhere near normal traffic to pass is a day in which the economic future worsens. And here in America, quite honestly, we're going to be more insulated than just about anywhere else in the world for two main reasons. The first, they're really both actually due to the geography. We are by far the most removed from this in terms of actual distance out of any major country in the world. The second piece is that we have vast natural resources that we're able to tap into that many other countries don't have. And I guess the third piece that you can throw in is because of the vast wealth that we have in this country, by and large, in the aggregate, we'll be able to buy enough of whatever we need such that there probably won't be shortages. But there are other parts of the world where if this continues for any extended period of time, you're talking about shortages that are likely going to not just impact people's livelihoods, but their actual lives in terms of can they actually get food to put on the table, because it might not be there. It's not a case of it costing too much. It simply may not be there because of problems with fertilizer not being available and things along those lines. So I think that when we look at the economic impacts here in the US, again, we have to look at a range of scenarios because we don't know exactly what's going to happen. So in the event that by this weekend, things are resolved and hey, it's not, necessarily a perfect solution for anyone, but transits begin to go back through the strait at a normal clip over the next few weeks, it still is going to be something where, in my opinion, you're probably looking at a 9 to 12 month period at a minimum of higher than baseline inflation. And it's going to take, probably somewhere in that 12 to 18 months for things to fully normalize because of the disruptions that we've seen. If we're sitting here and things are resolved towards the end of March, so maybe within the next few weeks, I think we're probably extending those timelines out by about a year and the magnitude of the inflationary problem grows. And if we're still sitting here, quite honestly, by early May, and we still don't have ships transiting in any meaningful way through Hormuz, I think at that point you have a global economic recession that is almost a near certainty. And domestically, the inflation picture gets pretty bad for at least a couple of years at a minimum, probably coupled with some job loss at a meaningful level as well. And we can go through some of the reasons for all those things that may end up happening then.
Yeah, it would be a good conversation. I'd like to get to it. It did strike me that USAID was pretty much ended when the Trump administration came in. And a lot of people that I know that are involved in world charities and food were utterly devastated by that because they knew that this was another pathway that was closed for feeding hungry people in the world. And just sort of, as we talk about this, it's just another thing that's been sort of loaded on people who have nothing. Just going back to the Straits of Hormuz, when I read about that, I thought, what we are as a world, we're a global economy now, and one thing like this can sort of slow down an entire world's economy. I think about during COVID when the cargo ship, the Evergreen cargo ship, got stuck in the. Now that was in Suez, wasn't it?
Yes.
Same thing happened, right? An immediate halt to things just creates these difficulties, And I live in South Boston, and catching up on that, I didn't get any sleep for 2 or 3 weeks because those ships were coming in once they were allowed to. And but it's fragile, isn't it? I mean, as an economist, you must live on a knife edge all the time. So just sort of getting back to that, what are the consequences? Can you explain how goods and services are sort of go up when oil prices go up? I think there's probably a couple of reasons for that, right? And there's a couple of obvious ones, but it's always going to be that if you're paying more for oil, you're going to pay for everything else, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take you back to my college days, and 2008, I was a college senior, and I was, buying the most important commodity that any college senior buys, which is beer.
Yeah.
And at the time, heading into that summer, the summer of 2008, a case of beer was $10 for the finest Keystone Light that you could get in the state of New Hampshire. And it was something where, remember, that was the summer right before the financial crisis when oil went to $147 a barrel and gas prices spiked right before, kind of everything fell off a cliff. And I still remember that over the course of that summer and into the fall, the price for that case of beer went from $10 to $11 to $12 and then never came back down. Even though the economy fell off a cliff, the price of beer did not. And the reason is very simple, is that the cost of that transportation ends up getting factored into what the store that you're buying any finished product from is going to charge you, because they have to pay for that transportation. And so they pass that along as they would with any other increase in cost. And you're already starting to see this seeping into different areas. So internationally, one of the big problems is, and again, another reason why we're going to be more insulated here, most of the product that comes through the Strait of Hormuz goes east to Asia. It doesn't come west to the United States. It tends to go east. And so what you're seeing, if you look at a lot of the airlines that are based in Southeast Asia, Singapore Air, Cathay Pacific, those types of names, they've already instituted anywhere from 10 to 20% fuel surcharges because of this, because the price of jet fuel has gone up, and that's a huge input cost for them. So if you look at this in terms of inflation, remember, we divide inflation generally into two categories: headline inflation, which includes food and fuel, and core inflation, which does not. So gas prices going up, that's going to be stripped out before you get to what we call core inflation. But things like transportation services, which include airfares, those are in core inflation, and those are going to be moving up as a result of this. So whenever we're talking about inflation, ultimately it boils down to one thing: it's companies raising prices. I think sometimes we overcomplicate it, but inflation is companies saying, I'm going to raise my price. And then it's not just them saying that, it's us saying, okay, we're going to pay that. Because there are plenty of examples where companies try to raise a price and are unsuccessful in doing so. And so the price comes back down because consumers don't accept the higher price. Yeah. But when we do accept it, that's what ends up generating inflation, or not generating, but it prints as inflation. And so this is why it seeps into all these different areas, whether it's airfares, it's going to seep into food, and not just because of the oil cost. The Middle East and the Strait of Hormuz is a huge transit center for urea, which is a nitrogen-based fertilizer that's used in all kinds of agriculture. I'm very much expecting to see higher food prices worldwide. And unfortunately, again, this is where, like, if things continue for a while, you're going to have a large portion of Southeast Asia that's not going to be able to get the amount of fertilizer needed for the planting seasons that are coming up. And you have the potential for simply not enough food to be available to feed all of the people in those areas, and the potential for famines, which is not something that we really talk about much in 2026 generally.
It's fascinating to think about that, because there's a blueprint for this in a global economy, right? We know what the causes are of an action like this. And what is extraordinary is that there's probably little thinking that goes into that, Chuck, right? You just explained really well the consequences of an action. And I just wonder if there's any weighing up of that in terms of, this is our goal in Iran, these are the consequences, and we are insulated, but we're not totally insulated, are we? Because, and you said it before, and somebody said it to me the other day, and this was a MAGA person actually said, look, when prices go up for basic things for us, they never come down. And that's a conventional wisdom, which is actually true. How much thought is going into the long-term consequences for the health of the world, if you like, and the people when we make a decision to go to war like this?
You know what? I don't know. I mean, I'm not in any position where, I have inside knowledge as to what is or isn't being debated as these decisions are being made. But it is something where, as you look at this and say, okay, how do we navigate this in the best way possible? I do think that the problem that is showing up is that even with some of the solutions that we are coming up with, they're simply not large enough at scale to deal with the Strait of Hormuz being shut. I mean, you talk to anyone who's a true commodity expert. I am not. I'm a commodity tourist. Like, I've spent the last 2 weeks listening to the experts, and I know enough to be dangerous at this point. But you talk to the ones that are really the experts in the space, and they basically say, look, this is the kind of stuff that we typically game out in terms of, how do we handle this? And basically the answer always is, well, you can't actually replicate the supply of stuff that comes through there. There's no way to do it. The only way that things end up balancing out is if demand comes down to meet where supply is. And, you talk about yesterday, the International Energy Agency, they announced a 400 million barrel release of oil from global strategic petroleum reserves, which sounds like a lot of oil. And don't get me wrong, it is a lot of oil. We've been missing over the last 2 weeks now anywhere from, it's probably somewhere in like the 14 to 15 million barrel a day range coming through Hormuz when you average out how things have changed and been rerouted. You're talking about almost 200 million barrels that are already missing from the global economy. And the max flow rate that you get from these SPRs, these strategic petroleum reserves, in the aggregate is maybe 3 to 5 million barrels a day, maybe 6 if you can really push it somehow. So you still do the math and you say every day that the strait's closed, even with these releases, you're still building a deficit probably of 8 to 10 million barrels a day on top of it. I mean, by the end of March, if we're still here like this, you're talking about a 400 million barrel deficit. This release has already been eaten up. And remember, a lot of that oil won't be released until 6 months from now because of how slowly it actually comes out. So I think as much as it is a problem just with like the top line numbers, it's a problem of flow rates where what's missing right now and what we can realistically cover, it doesn't bridge the gap fully. And that's even in things like oil, where we have these global strategic reserves. You talk about, aluminum. There's a ton of aluminum that's manufactured in the Middle East that comes through Hormuz as well. It's just not going to show up where it needs to go. Another byproduct of all the stuff that gets produced there is helium. I think it's like 30% of the world's helium gets produced there. And it doesn't just go into balloons for my kids' birthday parties and things like that. When you're talking about high-end semiconductor manufacturing, helium is critical. I have no idea why, probably because of its inert properties, but it's critical in the manufacture of these high-end semiconductors. And there is no replacement for it. You can't just say, let's use something else. We're talking about needing to be precise down to, the nanometer. And so you can't just replace it with something else. So this has implications then for the global economy. If you have semiconductor fabs that you can't run because they don't have the helium you need, think about how that, grinds the gears of the global economy more slowly because you can't run one of the biggest growth engines of the last few years, which is computer chips for AI and things like that. So these are the second and third order ramifications that you have when you look at the picture. And again, this is why every day that the strait remains closed, the pressure is just back building, and it doesn't feel like people have fully appreciated that yet. And I don't know why. I think sometimes it just takes us a while to kind of get our arms around these things. But I look at it and I say, look, every day that this is still the status quo where things are not moving is a day where the situation's getting worse and we just don't realize it yet.
Yeah, and we're slow to realize. You're absolutely right. And it's not until really it hits our pockets that we begin to join those dots. Chuck, I think that's one of the best explanations I've ever had of why there are long-term effects of decisions that are made now that we're going to know for a year or so. And unfortunately, we've been dealing with this for a while, right? I was reading the other day that if you go into McDonald's and you order a Big Mac or whatever it is, a meal, it's around $17 now, and I don't eat that, but when my kids were eating it or whatever, you were paying $5 or $6 for that. And you said that when consumers decide that they're not going to pay the price for it is actually an anti-inflationary measure, and people are not going to afford that. McDonald's was always something that you could fill your kids' tummies with when they were hungry and you didn't have much money. Things are changing, and they're always changing for people who don't have the resources to do that. And I think when you think about it, that knowledge and that understanding that you're imparting to us is critically important as we come up to election time, because decisions that are made that appear to be somewhat I'm very careful with my words here, but some not thought out about the American people, and there are glib comments about American business will do well from this. People have got to start paying attention to that, because there's cause and effect, and it is people on High Street who will be affected by this.
Yeah, I think when you look at, look, the impact that we all see very quickly is obviously gas prices, because, you're on your way to work, you go past the same station each day, and it's one price that you see right there. But, how does this end up filtering into food prices? How does this end up filtering into, things that you wouldn't even think of? Let's say that you're trying to open a new restaurant and aluminum prices have gone up. How much are your pots and pans when you're trying to open that business? How much is the cost of, the new stove that you're trying to buy for, your business? How much does that go up? These are, some of the things that we watch for. And the problem is that, again, typically the way that inflation has been vanquished historically, like it's not a particularly good way. Like, basically the recipe is, again, you get consumers to a place where they can't pay those higher prices. It's basically through a recession that prices start to stabilize. Recessions are not fun for anyone either. So you're kind of looking at this and you're like, okay, so prices go up, and then our recipe for trying to cure high prices is we raise interest rates to slow the economy and create job loss such that there's a recession. Consumers get hit with the high prices, and then they get hit with the job loss on top of that. And it's challenging. And this is also with the backdrop, by the way, like, it's not lost on me. Pretty much every year for the last 6 now, we've been dealing with something economically, whether it's, hey, you got COVID in 2020 and the shutdowns, 2021 and 22, you've got high inflation. 23, you've got, Silicon Valley Bank blowing up and concerns about a banking crisis. 24 and 25, you've got the labor market slowing and people, struggling to find jobs in a lot of areas. So it's not like we're coming off, the 1990s where we're sitting there saying, hey, it's been, a great decade, economically for a lot of us. We're coming off of kind of a financially exhausting 5 or 6 years already.
Yeah.
And a lot of families are just at the point now, I hear it over and over, where it's just, man, like, what's it going to be next?
Yeah.
Like, what is it going to be next? And how are we going to deal with it? And, you navigate it the best that you can, but it's really hard for a lot of folks these days.
It is so well said. And Chuck, as usual, we're running out of time, but I think, that's probably somewhere to end in terms of this is the real impact on families in America. And, where everybody's feeling it. Well, not everybody, but the people in our communities are feeling it all the time. So thank you so much for giving us a walk through the rationale and what is likely to come, although it's not a very good picture, but I really appreciate it. Thank you, Chuck.
Absolutely. Appreciate the invite and looking forward to talking again soon.
Thanks, Chuck. Bye, everybody. Take care.